What if I told you that a simple $2 digital file could turn into a six-figure business? Sounds crazy, right? But I've already sold thousands of digital art files on Etsy, including a wild $3,000 in just 30 days. And I'm on a mission to scale a brand new Etsy shop to $10,000 as fast as possible while documenting every step. In this video, we'll cover the biggest period of growth this challenge shop has ever seen. You'll learn how to completely automate customer service for an Etsy business. Plus, I'll give you a framework for one of the most talked about features we as sellers have access to on Etsy, Etsy ads. We'll do a deep dive into the world of ads, and I'll share how I use them for my shop and maybe what I wish I would have done differently. If you're selling on Etsy or thinking about starting, this is the video I wish I had watched before I made my biggest mistakes. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, let's get up to speed. I launched this Etsy shop in September of 2024 with one goal: scale it to $10,000 as fast as possible. In just 4 days, I created 100 listings using AI-generated oil painting style artwork from Midjourney. But instead of manually preparing every file, I used automation. First, I ran each artwork through my Photoshop script, Tempest, which automatically generated 10 mockups and 5 cropped digital files in different aspect ratios. Then I uploaded them to Etsy using those mockups as these listing images and the digital files as the product itself, so customers could download, print, and frame them instantly. If you're just hearing about this business for the first time and having trouble believing it, check out these 3 businesses doing this exact same thing. Lexington Prints has sold over 41,000 images, Antique White Art has sold over 61,000, and the number one seller in the space, North Prints, has sold over 436,000 images. These images sell for about $3 on average. So if you do the math, that's an estimated 6 figures for the first 2 shops and over $1 million for North Prints. And since it's just an image file that we're selling, these designs can sit on Etsy and just sell and sell over and over again without us doing anything, and with almost 100% profit margin. So for this challenge, we're attempting to become another one of these success stories. A few days after launching, I uploaded my first 100 listings, and then something amazing happened. I was absolutely overjoyed when that same day that I posted my first images, I looked down at my phone and saw the Etsy notification for my very first sale. And for these digital prints, Etsy auto delivers the files. So all I had to do was do a little happy dance and go on with the rest of my night. After that first sale, I doubled down on the shop. After a couple more weeks, I added hundreds of new art designs, and I was at a total of 536 listings in my shop. I know that sounds like a crazy amount of time and effort, but as a programmer, I actually built a few automation tools to build my listings and upload hundreds and hundreds of them to Etsy automatically. Check out the link in the description to use them for yourself right now. I also spent a bit of time building my shop banner, my about section, my FAQs, and even getting some discounts running. And I even made 2 more sales along the way. And now, finally, about a month after I opened my shop, I was sitting here with a fully decorated shop, 536 listings, and a grand total of 3 sales. So now we're all caught up. It's currently the middle of October in this story, so let's talk about what happened next. Well, the short answer is not much in the beginning. I had doubled the number of listings in my shop, and then doubled them again to get to those 536 listings, but this was all in the span of just a few days. On Etsy, it can take 4 to 6 weeks for a listing to really gain traction. So I knew patience would be my best friend in the coming days. So while I was waiting around for my 4th sale, I decided to get to work on a way to automate a completely different aspect of my shop: customer service. Although I only had a few sales in this shop, in my much larger Etsy shop that I own, it's pretty common for customers to reach out with questions or clarifications. A lot of the time, the answers are in my listing images or description, but I get it. Not everyone is going to read your listings word for word, and some shoppers just want to go right to you with their questions. That might sound like a bit of a pain, but check this out. We can actually get AI to help our customers for us, and I'll walk through exactly how to do it. First, we need to go to everyone's favorite website, ChatGPT, and hit Explore GPTs here on the left. Then hit Create at the top right. We can give it the name of our shop, followed by the letters GPT. Since I'm keeping the shop name a secret in order to let it grow organically for this challenge, I'll just give this GPT the name of Evergreen Prints as an example. Now, it's time to train our customer support agent. I'd recommend typing out a couple of words yourself to start out. You could write something like this: You are a customer service GPT for a printable wall art Etsy shop called Evergreen Prints. This shop sells digital files in 5 sizes. Please be extremely kind, cheerful, and helpful to customer messages, and write messages on behalf of Alec, or whatever your name is. And that's about it. The last step to make this agent even smarter is to upload our size charts into this knowledge section so the GPT knows the 5 sizes we provide and all their ratios. Or we can enter in parts of our description where we talk about sizes we provide. And with that, we just hired our first AI employee to run the customer service for our business. So if I got a message like this from a customer, all I have to do is screenshot my message, send it over to my custom GPT, and simply ask it to respond. It really is that easy. And after a second or two, we get a 10 out of 10 response that is detailed, professional, and friendly. And even more thorough than we probably would have written ourselves. And we can just copy and paste it right into the chat box to provide fast, high quality, top-notch customer service to our customers. I've gotten a ton of 5-star reviews praising my main shop for its great customer service, and I follow the same method. So you obviously don't have to do this for your Etsy business, but I would highly recommend it. It'll save you time and boost the quality of your responses. And if you find that its responses are missing the mark, you can always go up into the GPT here and click Edit to add more notes to its training set, to fine-tune it even further. But now, let's get back to the story where things are about to take off like a rocket. I was feeling great about my shop, ready for the flood of shoppers to come rushing into my digital shelves. But it was quiet. A full 2 weeks went by without a sale, and I was still holding on to my idea that I just had to be patient. But my enthusiasm was draining. It soon became 3 weeks since my last sale, and I was getting desperate. At that moment, I knew I had a big decision to make. See, in my main shop, I was seeing a lot more success than I was here. At this point, around 2 to 10 sales a day. But for the last several months in that main shop, I was actually spending a bit of money to bring my listings to the top of search results. So buyers would see my products on the first page of search, instead of them being buried on page 5 or 10, or even page 20. And the way I did this was by paying for Etsy's built-in marketing tool, Etsy Ads. Many sellers have a love-hate relationship with ads, and I do as well. On one hand, it can boost your shop to 2x, 5x, or even 10x the sales, and give it growth that it never could have attained organically. But on the other hand, it can easily leave your shop in a deficit where you have days like this where you're spending $20 and you get nothing in return. The one huge positive with these ads is that Etsy allows us to specify a cap for its daily spend. So if you never want to spend more than just $1 a day, you can do that. But that also means that if your prints are selling like crazy, your ad will give you about 5 or 10 clicks until it uses that dollar's worth of clicks, and then it will shut off for the day. So yeah, it really is a bit of a balancing act. But I was desperate with my new shop. I knew the potential it could be reaching based on the numbers from my main shop, and I also knew that we were in the middle of fall, with the holidays right around the corner, which are the 2 biggest booms for wall art on Etsy. So I decided to try my luck with this new business, and I enabled Etsy Ads for the very first time. I started small, $5 per day, and I just enabled a few of my best listings. So the few that had actually gotten sales, and a few that didn't have sales but got a favorite or 2 from shoppers. After it was all set up, I then just had to give time, and let my shop work with this new boost to its best listings. For context, this is right at the start of November 2024, flipping the switches to turn on ads in this new shop for the very first time. And as a reference, I started the shop in September, so about 2 months before, and I was currently sitting at 3 sales and 536 listings. But now let's walk through the next handful of weeks and see how these ads performed. In the first week of November, I proudly earned 1 sale. And it actually wasn't even from an ad. I knew this because when an ad brings in a sale, you see this little bullhorn icon, and my sale was iconless. But hey, a sale still felt great. Now I was up to 4 sales in total. During that second week in November, I made a total of 2 sales. And again, surprisingly, both of these were organic as well. My ads were spending every day, but it was extremely small. Etsy only uses a fraction of its daily spend. So I set it at $5 a day, but over the entire first 2 weeks, I had spent about $10 in total, about 20 to 80 cents per day. But then we moved to week 3 in November, where my shop finally started hitting its stride. 8 sales this week. But once again, I was so surprised to see that 7 out of the 8 sales were totally organic. Now, this was an exciting turning point. My shop was finally picking up momentum, and it felt like things were starting to click. With more organic sales coming in, I decided to double down. I started turning on ads for my best performing listings to give them an even bigger boost. And that's when things really started to take off. So now during week 4 in November, my shop brought in a total of 12 sales, with 10 out of those 12 coming from ads. If we take a second to think about those numbers for a moment, I just got 10 sales in a week from ads. And my shop was sitting at a grand total of 26 sales. That means in just 1 week, I added almost 40% growth to my business with ads. After that, we crossed into the first month of December, right before the apex of the holiday shopping boom. And in that first week of December, my shop did 45 sales. 45 sales in 7 days. When before this week, I only had 26 sales total. It felt like the shop had caught fire, like it was soaring on its own to completely new heights. I was so overjoyed by this boost in sales that I just wanted to crank this machine up to 10,000. And without spoiling the last 3 weeks in December, I will say it worked. We'll get into the numbers in a second, but even though I had a successful holiday season in my shop, I've come to realize that there were 2 key areas where I was losing profit without realizing it. With the right tweaks, I could have made 2x, 5x, or maybe even 10x more income. I could just give you some quick tips, but these 2 topics, running profitable ads and pricing your listings correctly, deserve a deep dive. These 2 ideas might be some of the most powerful levers you can pull to make money on Etsy. So I want to give you guys everything I know, both from my experience running really profitable ads and pricing my listings correctly, to also mistakes I've made in the past, and even in this challenge shop, where I overspent on ads or priced my products too low. I want to share everything I know with you guys so you can make more money and get these lessons without the scars. The first topic I want to dive into is Etsy ads. While my shop was getting a huge boost in sales, I was actually spending anywhere from $6 to $20 a day on ads. And at that time, I didn't know how to optimize them. And as I quickly learned, when you scale ads, you also scale inefficiencies. There are 3 steps to running profitable ads on Etsy that I've put together after learning from this experience. In this challenge, I did pretty well following steps 1 and 2, but step 3 is where I really lost sight of the goal and drastically overspent on ads when I definitely didn't need to. Let's go through each of the steps so you can run ads profitably and avoid these big mistakes. I call this the DNO or Dino framework. Step 1 is data. Start by testing everything. Set a small daily ad budget, maybe $5 or $10, and promote a mix of 20, 30, or even 50 different listings. Pick the ones you think will be best sellers, but don't overthink it. At this step, it's all about gathering data. We just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Step 2 is N, narrow down. Once you have about 1 to 3 weeks of data, take the best 20% and stop the other 80%. It might feel sad to turn off listings that were doing decent, but it's best to make sure you're only spending money on listings that will bring in positive returns. Plus, Etsy listings will still get promoted organically even when ads are off. Now, before we get into step 3, if things are going well, you can start increasing your spend, even up to $100 a day or more if you're comfortable. But this isn't a set it and forget it type thing. You have to check in, at least daily or every other day, to see how things are going. If a listing does have a bad day, it's okay to give it a second chance. For example, a listing that loses $1 today could bring in a shopper tomorrow who spends $50 in your shop. And by the way, this actually happens a lot more than you think, which is why having bulk discount offers is a great strategy. But if it's been several days or a full week and an advertised listing is still losing money, meaning its ROAS or return on ad spend is below the value of 1, you have 2 options. You can either turn the ad off completely or move to step 3 of running profitable ads, optimize. Turning the ad off completely is pretty straightforward, but optimizing the listing is much more vague. If you're going this route, then there are 2 ways to optimize. One you can actually do inside of Etsy ads. If you go into detailed stats under an ad, you can see all the different search terms that triggered it. If you're getting a lot of clicks but no orders, that could mean the keyword phrase isn't a great match for your listing. In this screen, you can actually turn off individual keywords so Etsy stops showing your ad to these types of buyers. This is a huge way to save on ad spend, because the way you actually use money with these ads is that Etsy charges you per click. So quite literally, every time someone clicks on an advertised listing like this, the seller gets charged about 10 cents. I know, that totally blew my mind when I learned it for the first time. Sponsored links on Google search and Amazon work the exact same way. But the amount you get charged can vary based on how popular the niche is. And as a side note, you do not get charged for views. So if a ton of people see your ad but don't click, that doesn't cost you anything. So with that said, you can go down this list and look for keywords with high clicks and low orders, or really high views but low clicks, as that also means the shoppers searching for that keyword aren't the right shoppers for your item. But of course, use your best judgment here. The other way to do step 3 of Dino is to optimize the listing itself. That could just mean adjusting the title to use more precise long tail keywords, like changing nature wall art to printable oak tree wall art. You can also refine your tags to attract the right buyers, as all of these optimization steps are meant to simply place our listing right in front of the type of customer who is the most likely to purchase. So those are the 3 Dino steps of running profitable ads: data, narrow down, optimize. But this is actually a cycle more than a step-by-step process. For example, after you optimize, you'll let your ads run for a while, then get more data, and at that point, it might be time to narrow down again. Let's take my story as an example. I'll walk through exactly how I use this framework to turn a negative ad streak into a positive one in just one move. And after that, we'll dive into the second major factor that can make or break your Etsy profits: pricing. Because as you'll see, even with a solid ad strategy, if your pricing isn't right, you'll be leaving a ton of money on the table. With the shop in this challenge, I went through the Dino cycle many times. But there was one moment in December where I was actually letting a single listing eat up most of my ad budget without realizing. At one point, my best-selling print was using about 70% of my ad spend, leaving only 30% for the rest of my advertised listings. At first, this was fine, since it was bringing in sales and it had a positive ROAS. But as time went on, the returns started dropping. A few weeks later, it was still eating up most of my budget, but the return on ad spend had dropped to around 50%. Meaning I was putting money in and only getting 50% back from the sales. But when I finally turned that ad off, something crazy happened. Some of my other listings, which had barely been getting any ad budget, started to take off. A few of them had incredible returns, like a 4x ROAS, meaning for every dollar I spent, I got $4 back. Those listings never would have had a chance to shine if I let that one heavy hitter keep draining my budget. And so that's what I mean when I say this is a cycle. At that point in my shop, I had data from the last few weeks. I saw that one listing was eating up all my spend and only returning a 0.5 ROAS. So I narrowed down once again, which made my shop much more profitable in the weeks afterwards. As a final thought on this, it's easy to assume that just because something was performing well, it will keep performing well indefinitely. But sometimes a listing just runs its course. And if you keep dumping ad money into it, it stops being an asset and starts being a liability. I like to call these listings black holes. They start off as bright, profitable stars, but at some point they collapse in on themselves, sucking up ad spend while delivering worse and worse returns. At the end of the day, there's no perfect formula for Etsy ads. In fact, I think some of you might actually benefit from not using ads at all. Ads will definitely put your listing in front of more buyers, but it's not always the right buyer. At its core, the game of Etsy ads is to get your listing laser focused and target it at the exact shopper who would purchase it. Whereas with non-advertised listings, they'll be a bit harder for shoppers to find, but a lot of the time the shoppers who do find it are that perfect buyer, which is how they found it in the first place. So even though we just went through my entire ads process, I'm not trying to say that you need to run them. If you want to maximize your growth and watch your ads dashboard multiple times a week and be willing to tweak things frequently, then go for it. But if you want this business to completely run in the background, where you can post listings, walk away, and never be forced to walk on this tightrope, then maybe letting your listings grow organically is actually the best choice. But in either case, I did say there were 2 major topics that I wanted to deep dive into. We've now covered everything on Etsy ads, but there is one huge lever that will make you a lot more money no matter whether you run ads or not. And that is pricing. As a reminder of where we left off in the story, I had made 45 sales in the first week of December. And I was absolutely mind blown by those 45 sales. But in the week following, I made a total of 56 sales in the next 7 days, which left me completely awestruck, and I was overcome with excitement. I felt like every time I'd look at my phone throughout that week, I'd get a new pop-up for an Etsy sale, usually multiple at a time. But here's the thing. Even though I was making a ton of sales, my profit margins were razor thin. I had just priced my prints at $2.08, thinking the low price would encourage more buyers, and in a way it did. I was getting sales, but that strategy had two major downsides. First, my profit per sale was tiny. If I was letting my shop grow organically, this price point would have been fine. But since I was spending a good chunk on ads, this took a huge bite out of my overall profit. And there was a second problem that I didn't realize until later. Pricing affects perceived value. There's a famous study where researchers had people try 3 glasses of wine. One from a bottle they were told was super cheap, one from a middle-priced bottle, and one from an extremely expensive bottle of wine. Almost every participant said the most expensive bottle was easily the best tasting wine. But it turned out that all 3 bottles were exactly the same. That experiment just goes to show that the price of an item doesn't just reflect value, it actually creates value in the mind of customer. So in my case, my $2.08 prints were cheap, but they also looked cheap. Don't get me wrong, I was still selling a ton of prints, which was great, but if I could go back in time, I'd bump my prices up dramatically. And to drive this point home, take a look at this shop. They started in January of 2024 and already have over 9,000 sales. And if you look at their pricing, their prints are over $5 each. Compare that to my shop, where my prints were around $2. And after ad spend and Etsy fees, I was barely making 50 cents per sale. Meanwhile, this shop, selling at double my price, would make $3 or $4 per sale if their ads had a similar cost. This is probably the most important point in this video. If you don't care about running ads or the customer service GPT, try to hear what I'm saying about pricing. Even though this shop's prints were only about twice as much as mine, they make $3 to $4 in profit compared to my 50 cents. So that's not just double, that's 6 times to 8 times as much profit. This is because when you raise your prices, you don't raise expenses. So it disproportionately goes to your profit and the bottom line. Plus, it plays into what I said about prices creating value. This shop looks absolutely premium. And granted, their listings and banner paint that picture as well, but you could easily replicate this and make 6 to 8 times as much money as I made over the holidays, just with this simple pricing tweak. For my shop, if I could do this holiday season over again, I would have priced every single print at least $4. When you're just starting out, it's tough because you don't have that many sales and it feels like you need to price lower to get traction. But the reality is, buyers are willing to pay more if there's more perceived value. And this also ties into another point about niching down. If we look at the shop, all their designs are extremely specific to this pastel watercolor niche, and they're growing just as fast as Lexington prints or antique white art. It's much better to keep your shop tight and focused rather than try to be a little bit of everything and seeing what works. Because honestly, any niche can work, but none of them will work if you're trying to do all of them at once. And as a side note, this shop doesn't just focus on watercolor. They've also positioned a lot of their designs for nurseries and playrooms, which is a massive market on Etsy. Ultimately, I can't go back in time, but I am now a firm believer that pricing as premium is one of the best options for 2025. This shop broke my belief on this, so hopefully I can break a belief for one of you watching this. Now, after that little side quest into how I would have done things differently, let's finish this off and see how the rest of the month played out. Like I mentioned, I made 45 sales in week 1 of December and 56 sales in that second week. At this point, around 75% of my sales were coming from ads. And it was about 20% of my listings that were bringing in a majority of the sales. These numbers are typical. About 20% of products bring in 80% of customers. Which is cool because as you refine your shop, you learn which design styles to double down on and which ones to avoid. In fact, in the midst of all this, that's exactly what I did. My shop sat at those 536 listings for a long time, but right before that first week in December, I designed and uploaded another 113 listings, with these being specific to the holiday months. It's always a good idea to make a few seasonal designs, for seasons like spring and summer, but especially for fall and even more importantly for the holidays. So I made some winter forest prints, some Christmas ornament prints, some winter wildlife designs, and anything I thought shoppers would love. And it definitely worked, because as we moved into those first 2 weeks of December, those new prints were becoming some of my best sellers by far. In week 3 of December, I did 55 sales, so just one less than 56 the previous week. And it was clear that 3 of my listings were absolutely killing it and bringing in 90% of my sales. Finally, during that last week of December, when the actual Christmas holiday was, things started to slow down, and I saw just 25 sales that week, as many people put down their phones to be with family and friends. Ultimately, over the 2 months of November and December, I had 202 orders, a 3% conversion rate, and $484 in revenue. What's extra crazy was that just 2 listings brought in 146 of those 202 orders, as both of these listings received the bestseller badge on Etsy. So they just snowballed like crazy. And by the way, when I say orders, those are just purchases, whereas sales are the total number of items sold. So one order could have 5 items in it, which counts as 5 sales. So all in all, at the very end of the month of December, this shop was sitting at 658 listings and 255 sales. And I was very happy to wake up that morning on January 1st and see that my shop was now the proud recipient of star seller status. And honestly, this is just the beginning. Even with all the success over the holidays, I've been testing new strategies, tweaking my pricing, and refining my ads, and scaling my shop even further. And some of the stuff that's happened since then has been just as crazy. In part 4, I'll break down what's next, what I'm doing differently, and how I'm taking this challenge to the next level. Let me know in the comments, do you run Etsy ads or do you prefer to grow organically? I'd love to hear your take. And if you want to fast track your own success, join my community where I share automation tools, strategies, and everything I've learned to help you scale your Etsy shop faster and smarter. Plus, get access to the automation tools that I use to fill this shop with over 600 listings that actually sell, so you can take your Etsy business to the next level. Click the link in the description to get access, and I will see you in the next one.